Good evening once again, and welcome to our usual Monday program, The Debate. I am your host, Mbolifo Elvis, and today I'll be having as panelists Pauline Haikula and Philip Miyugi. Today we'll be looking at an integrated, united, and a confident continent by 2063, and we'll be looking at how one common African language can promote and achieve the Africa that we want. Before we get into our debate, I would like to have welcome Pauline. It's been a while, Pauline. We've not had you on the program. I want to welcome you and say you're so welcome to be here this afternoon. Philip is always there, and would like to get the word. I begin with Pauline first. Pauline, can we hear from you coming back after a long while from the program?
Yes, thank you for having me. It's good to be back. And today's subject is of special interest to me. So I'm excited to look forward to the discussions.
Thank you so much, and you are so welcome. We've missed you in the house, and we're happy you're there. Philip, can I get a word from you before I introduce our topic and we get into the crux of the matter?
Yes, Mr. Mbolifor, thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to contributing my ideas to lead us to the Africa we want.
Thank you so much. Today we're looking at how one common African language can promote and achieve the Africa that we want, of course, by 2063. And we know that there is a multiplicity of languages in Africa, which often is seen as a hindrance to development of the continent. Just like currency, one feels completely lost. And when you cross borders, your language becomes so obsolete and strange to other Africans. So some Africans will only consider you as their brother when you can speak their mother tongue. And today in Africa, the search for development, language is often ignored. So we do not consider language. And at the end of the day, we discover that we are not able to express ourselves or to exchange knowledge because we either got the knowledge from a different language and now we are faced with the problem of, sharing with others. But you will bear with me that there is a very close, if not inseparable relationship between language and development. Remember, today we are looking at how one common African language can promote and achieve the Africa we want. So when we talk of African development, therefore, many economists will rush to look for their calculators to look at the GDPs, the GNPs, or the per capita income. But today we want to show how language can play a primordial role in making Africa the Africa we actually want by 2063. Philip, I am happy you're back on stage after a long while out of this program. I must say that we congratulate you for all the contributions you're making behind the curtains. And I'll go right straight away with, I'll take Pauline. Pauline has been out for long. I want to get her voice and what she has to tell us today. Pauline, we are
Yes.
talking about language today, one common African language. And I have said that when we want to look at development in Africa, language is not usually considered. And if I must tell you a story before I even begin with the questions, when I went to university, I sat in a class that was surely a geology class. And after about 20 minutes, I was only hearing Ecos Terres, Ecos Terres. And I thought that the teacher was still welcoming us to the university. Before I turned around, I saw people copied already one page and asking, pardon, pardon. I got lost and went home and stayed for 2 weeks without coming to school because I was lost and could not really understand if I was at the right place. So, Pauline, language is a weapon. What is the impact of language on a given population? What do you think can be the impact of language to a given population?
Mhm. Okay. I would prefer to say that language is a tool that can be used for many purposes and to many ends. Yes, it can be weaponized, but it isn't necessarily always a weapon. Thus, the impact of a language on a population depends on how that language is being used and in the context in which it's being used. In this discussion, I think we're speaking of language as a political and a governance tool in the sense of official language. So the impact of an official language can have on a given population depends on many factors. One is, of course, the origins of that language, the political context and climate of the population in which it is being used, as well as the relationship between that context and the language itself. So, for example, if we look at history, the recent history of Namibia and South Africa, the way Afrikaans was used during apartheid as an official language, it was definitely a weapon that was wielded to terrorize, divide, and psychologically subjugate Black people and elevate Afrikaners and other preferred groups. That's why in 1976, when the apartheid regime decided Afrikaans would be the mode of instruction in all schools in South Africa, even school children understood the significance of that and they revolted in mass. So, but of course, language can also be a tool that unifies. For example, in post independent Namibia, we have a numerically small but culturally and linguistically diverse population. And through the adoption of a neutral official language, English, it has created a certain level of unity that wouldn't exist if any of the indigenous or other colonial languages, such as German or Afrikaans, had been made the official language. So, in this case, in the case of Namibia, the impact of adopting English as an official language can be seen as a good thing, as it brings the nation together. It allows government officials to easily communicate with their counterparts in the region and beyond, thus opening up the country to economic opportunities. So it definitely depends in the context in which the language is being used and the purpose for which it's being employed.
Context in which the language is used and the purpose for which it's being employed. And I get from your presentation that language can be a tool for unification and that it can equally be used to terrorize as well as
Yes,
divide. Yeah.
yes,
And that
certainly.
maybe if English is adopted, English, which is best understood, of course, by many African countries, that can go a long way to ease studies and equally ease communication. Yes, I take Philip. What do you think can be the impact of language to a population, to a continent like Africa?
Thank you, Mr. Elvis. And I'm very glad I'm speaking after my senior friend, Haikola Paulina, and she has really expounded it. And let me tell you, I agree with Pauline that language can be used as a weapon. And I'll just give you an example of my country where we speak various, almost 42 languages. And it has really affected us, even in all cycles of election, because I don't speak your language, I don't support you. And even our politicians have used the same. And when I give an example of Tanzania, you've seen how Tanzania have enjoyed a long period of peace. And this one I can confidently attribute to the fact that they are nationalized their Swahili language, and Tanzania is one of the countries that has very many tribes in Africa, and you cannot know that unless they tell you. Whoever is the president, which means language can bring peace and tranquility, can bring unity in a country. And when there's a peace in a country, and when there's a development and peace in a country, that contributes to the development of all Africa. Okay, so what I want to just say is that the role of language in socio-economic development cannot be overemphasized. Okay, when you speak one language, there is that unity. When you speak one language, there is that ease of doing business. You know, for example, right now as we speak, it will be very difficult for me to do business with a country, for example, in West Africa, which most of them speak in French. And for us in Kenya, our national language is Swahili and English. So it will be very difficult, because which means I will look for somebody to interpret for me, for us to do our document of transaction, for example, and that will take time and that will take a lot of cost, So at the end of the day, this cost factors into business. So I will fear doing business with somebody in West Africa because they don't speak my language. And in turn, I will go down in South Africa where we speak both of us speak English. So it will be very easy for us to develop as Western. So if there is something good that we are doing in the eastern side of Africa or in the south of Africa, it's very difficult for us to share with people in the West because they speak French and as we speak English. So I think in the mode of economic development, language plays a very important role other than just being a weapon. And also just to give an example of using it as a weapon, a language can be used as a weapon in that when maybe, for example, somebody comes to Kenya, we are bordering Somalia, where they fight, where they Aba Al-Shabaab. And when these people cross to Kenya, because that side we have Somalis who live next to Somalia, they can easily keep this guy because they think it's their person. You know, they will not tell the authority that we have somebody, we have a criminal here. And these people end up organizing terrorism activities within that location without the security people knowing, or without the other parts of the country who is not speaking that language knowing that there is a terrorist activities being organized at that particular point. At the end of it all, you will just be surprised that there is an attack in the capital city of Nairobi, like we had last year in DT, an hotel in Westlands, you know, because these people were held within the community. They were given protection by the people of the community because they speak one language. So it can easily be used as a weapon, and that I can confirm here. But we cannot overemphasize, or we cannot ignore the fact that one language can also contribute to social economic development of a country and Africa as a whole.
Thank you so much, Philip, for that brilliant presentation, which cues up with what Paulina said, that language is a weapon. And you're just drawing my attention to the fact that Kenya has about 42 languages, you can imagine. It means that once you step from one region or from one province to the other, one community to the other, you are faced with the problem of language, whereas you are just neighbors, which makes it difficult. And you equally brought up the...
Actually, allow me to add something, because you just mentioned Kenya again. And I can confirm that there are more than 43 as we speak, because we have other communities that are coming in. We recently added Indians as one of our tribes in Kenya. The rate at which Chinese is also taking up Kenya. Some of them don't even speak Swahili or English. And there are very many, they are everywhere in the capital city where I am. So we will even be more. So I think at this rate, we just have to have one national language like Tanzania. I know they also speak their own languages down there, but the one that is known, whether on national platform or whichever platform, is Swahili. So it is very difficult to say that, you know, this one is a Chaga, this one is a which one, this one is a which one. So it's very difficult to say. And that brings them together. That makes them peace. And when there is peace, you know, there is development, Mr. Elvis.
Okay, you have just 42 languages, but I'm seeing here Cameroon is having about 250 languages. So you see that you're still very far behind. Somebody just posted.
I agree.
Okay, so you see the multiplicity of languages, like I said in my introduction, which makes your own language just so useless, like our currency sometimes. I don't mean useless, but in terms that it's useless per se, but that it should not recognize in the other area where you are. And you equally talked of the problem that you need, if you have to do business, you have to look for an interpreter. Somebody will say it is a good idea that you will have a job, you will be creating a job for somebody, but that may be inconveniencing for you. You equally cited peace, unity, and development, which is actually the heart of our discussion this afternoon. We'll be coming back to Swahili that you mentioned in our subsequent interventions. But now, I want to thank you already for that brilliant introduction to the problem of language and how it can bring development. And I wish to take this opportunity equally to greet those of our fans who are watching us on Facebook. Please join our link, share, so that your friends equally can come to this program. This is your platform. This is your space. So that as youth, before 2063, we should have contributed our own quota to make sure that Africa be what we want it to be by 2063. Remember, today we are looking at an integrated, united, and a confident continent by 2063, where we are looking at how a common language can bring about development in Africa and equally promote all that we want for Africa by 2063. Thank you so much. We will be coming to Swahili, Kiswahili, like I said. And my second worry is that Arabic, English, French, and Portuguese are 4 official languages of the AU. Remember, we are looking at 2063, Agenda 2063, which is the AU, which is the flag bearer of this agenda. So how do Africans relate these? Because you see, mostly during meetings with African heads of states, they always have to translate. They have earphones translating from one language to the other. And we are having Arabic, English, French, and Portuguese as official languages of the AU. How do you, or how do Africans, how do you, I'm talking of Africans, you are African, an African, I am an African. So how do we relate these languages? Philip.
Yes, I think one of the languages that is widely spoken in Africa is Swahili, and where Swahili is mostly spoken in the East Africa, and then I think down in South Africa we have English and then some Portuguese, if I'm not wrong, and then on the northern part I believe we have and in some part of us East Africa we have Arabic. And then on the western side, if I'm not wrong, we have, I think, French. Okay. So I think we relate with these languages very well, and they are well distributed across Africa. However, I don't think they are languages for us, because you see some of the countries that are doing very well in terms of development are speaking their, can I call their native language, if I'm not wrong, their native language. China is a superpower now. It's really competing with the US. And they speak in Chinese, which is their own language. The child is born and the first language they learn is Chinese. You know, in England, they are the Englishmen. I remember you saying the other day when we were somewhere talking and you said, you're not an Englishman. So whether you use it well or you don't, it doesn't matter so long as you communicate. So I think some of us, I think some of us Africans, we are very bright, and we are the people actually leading in innovation, and that I can say without fear or favor, that we are the people leading in innovation in the world. And what happens is that we have been looked as you know, those inferior, those inferior people. We can't talk where people are talking, And you see, when we talk, when we go to school, when we are learning, at the same time, we have to learn a new language. Me, when I was born, I knew Swahili. I could ask for water, when I started talking. When I started talking, I could talk in my mother tongue, But when I go to school, I have to learn English, for example. I have to learn, for example, somebody who is speaking Portuguese or French as their national language. I have to learn Portuguese, for example. And you see, this one, I'm learning 2 things at the same time. I want to learn chemistry. I want to learn language. I'm learning mathematics. I'm learning language. So if we use our own language, it will be very easy to convert our thoughts and ideas into actionable objectives or actionable ideas that can be implemented, rather than when we are using other languages. I can't say these languages are bad, but we can easily transform our thoughts into ideas when we're using our own languages. I can't say for us in Kenya, I think we are the most, I recently saw some data that was saying that we are the most fluent, I think, in English or something. I don't know how true that is. I don't know whether my English is good to that level. But I can say that as much as we relate to these languages, we've been able to use them over time. But I think it will reach a time where we do not have to learn language at the same time as we also learn ideas, as we also learn other things that we need to know to be able to be productive. So I think at some point we will have to transform and use one language or learn in our own languages. But so far I can say we've related to these languages very well. But I think it's really a long process. And I think Pauline says she works in a university. I think she can confirm that it is very difficult for me when I'm doing exam, I have to convert it. I want to think in mother tongue and then try to translate in English or Portuguese or whichever language I'm using. So it becomes very difficult for us and it takes a lot of time. And at the end of the day, we don't finish our exams early. And what I wanted to confirm before I give Pauline a chance, I said Africans will lead in innovation. As we speak today, Kenya actually, and I think Nigeria, is the home of mobile money. And the world has not even understood as we speak how mobile money works, for example. And you see, there are many ideas that have always come into our heads, and we've always come up with ideas as Africans. But when it comes to translating them into other languages, when it comes to sharing them with other world leaders, it becomes a problem. So most of these ideas are being tampered on. We just forget about them because we are Africans. We have to translate fast our ideas for them to be accepted. So I think that is a challenge that we've had. That when we will be having our language and speaking our own language, it will be very difficult, very easy for us to communicate. Just like the others, Chinese speak their own languages, but we still trade together. So what about us Africans if we have one language? And I think one language that will take, it will force the other people to also learn a language, because if they want to do business with us and we are the people with the most resources, they will have to learn our language. And I think through that, Africa will develop. Let me give my sister Paulina time to also add on that.
Thank you so much. I think we are understanding ourselves because we can speak one language. Imagine I was here speaking English like I am doing, which is not even what I master much, because I master my dialect more than this. And Pauline speaking another language, we would have been in a serious chaotic situation. And I think biologists had understood this so long ago that they decided to use one language for their studies. For biology, they use which language is this again? Which is considered as Latin, which is considered as a dead language. Dead, not in the sense of dead, but dead in the fact that it doesn't change much. Like when we, ask children to call a dog in their normal dialect, names are so many. And you imagine that if you had to study or write a book and you use your own mother tongue, the book will just be for those of your region. And so biologists had understood this, and they decided to choose and opt for Latin as their language of expression, or language of studies in their scientific names and all of that. I come back to Pauline. I was talking about Arabic, English, French, and Portuguese being the official languages of the AU. And I was asking, how do you relate these languages as an African lady? Do you think it is worth it to have so many languages as official languages of the AU, of course?
We should also note that Kiswahili is also an official language of the AU, according to Article 11 of the Protocol on Amendments to the Constitutive Act of the African Union. It's a recent change, but it is also an official language. And in terms of how we relate to the other non-African languages, I think it's the same way that we relate to our official languages within our nations, in the sense that English is an official language in Namibia, so it's the language of governance. But a majority of the population, especially when you have leaders and politicians going out to the regions to where the people are, they are speaking in English, and only English, because that is the official language. However, what you find amongst the population is that maybe a person speaks pieces of 4 different languages. So the relation to these official languages, it makes sense why they are the official languages of the AU. But in terms of reaching the everyday African citizen and connecting with them and conveying to them the information and empowerment, it's a very weak link, I think. And it's something that benefits those who are highly educated and who are fluent in such languages, but it also leaves a lot of other members of society behind who are not fluent or literate in those languages to the levels that officials are.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're looking at how a common language can make Africa better. Now, we're looking at this, and we know it's a long journey. It is going to entail much. So what could be the challenges that we could encounter on the path to a lingua franca for Africa, one common language for Africa? What do you think will be the challenges, Philip?
Yes, I think the fact that there are people who are already of your age, for example, Elvis, not in a bad way, and already speak English or French, and then you want to introduce Swahili at this particular stage, I think obviously that is going to be a challenge because I will not want to. I'm 70. I don't want to go back to school again. Today, let's say for example, I did I just finished my degree the other day, and then you tell me that I have to go back because now that is the language that we have to speak. It will be a challenge for me. So I think number one, I think will be people will be against it. Many people, especially the elderly, will be against it. And then another thing is that I think it will require resources. So one hindrance is also to require resources, that because if you have to go back to school, if you have to learn a new language, you have to go back to a class, whether it's a small certificate class or whichever class it is that you're going to. It requires money. So, and you see, very many of us actually, we are very poor. I was just watching a free documentary on YouTube today when I was doing my work. I can multitask sometimes, about Madagascar. And I realized Madagascar is a very poor country. And some people are being arrested and taken to prison for very petty offenses. So if you take such people, if you take such a lady like the one I was watching, they can't even afford $25 to bribe, because for them to get out of prison, they are required to bribe, which was also a surprising thing for me. So if you bring a new language for such a person to learn a new language, it will be very expensive for them. So I think number one thing that I just said, to make it a nutshell, I think is the age. Number two is the resources. I think we don't have resources. As much as we are very rich in Africa, it is very funny that we can still talk of the fact that we don't have resources. Many people do not have access to these resources because most of them are owned by the government, which are not using them well. But if the government can decide to offer and give people free classes, if we are to have one language, and then African Union, because it's in charge of all these other governments, just wake up and say, give a resolution that you have to offer free classes for those who want to go, then I think it's something that can work. But those two things I consider something that will be a very serious hindrance to having a common language in Africa. Yes, Elvis.
Okay. You see, for the drawbacks for a common language, we have to begin with acceptance. And many people will find it very difficult to accept a new language at this particular point in time. At the age that they have to go back to school. And given that going back to school requires resources that many may not have, it is going to draw them back and equally discourage them from learning another language. And we talked of equally that the free classes are supposed to be offered by the AU to introduce, or by African governments to introduce one language for everybody. That equally can go a long way to help. Pauline, what is your take on the challenges that could be encountered if we want to go in for one language for Africa?
Yes, Philip and I are always on the same wavelength. So, of course, I also identified acceptance as an issue, especially depending on which language is selected. So, if we pick Swahili, for example, or rather if the AU picks Swahili, for example, that choice is not it's not a choice that it has political implications. It has a lot of baggage, if you will, that it leaves to others my question: why Swahili and not Yoruba or any other widely spoken African language? So there's also that. But in my view, if they were to pick Swahili, it would make sense considering it is the most widely spoken African language on the continent. So that's that. But is that enough for people to accept it as a lingua franca for the continent? It's not clear. And then, of course, financial resources is an issue, because if we're going to introduce this into the education system, According to the African Development Bank's African Economic Outlook for 2020, the report, African countries are already spending on average 5% of their GDP on education, which is great, and it's second amongst the regions. But who would fund the addition of Swahili to the curriculum, especially when we look at primary and secondary levels? And considering Africa's young population, most of our population is at that very bottom of the population pyramid between ages 0 and 25. So who would fund that? Would it be the AU, or will it be African governments who are already allocating on average 16% of their national budgets to education? And then beyond primary education, there's also tertiary education that you would have to incorporate that language, so that you're not just introducing it for the purposes of speaking it, but you're developing it to the levels of it being able to be employed in academic research, scientific innovations, and so on. Because one of the focuses of the AU is to have an economy based on skills that are science, technology, and innovation. So if we are doing that in our own language, then it adds more power and purpose to adopting a lingua franca for the continent. The third issue that I identified is about equality and inequality. As I said, whatever language you select, it will benefit some and it will disadvantage others. So if we were to select Kiswahili, Kenya and Tanzania would clearly benefit politically, culturally, and economically. They would have the resources ready to provide to other countries, teachers, for example, and even materials for education purposes. So, and then in terms of picking up the language, the speakers of African languages that are close linguistically to Kiswahili might find it easier to learn Kiswahili, whereas those who speak native languages that are a bit more distant would find it challenging to learn Kiswahili. So those are some of the issues that I identified.
Okay, thank you so much. I take this opportunity to read some of the messages that we have. We have Nandi Ray Ekome, who says, we want to admit that what Philip is saying is really pertinent. We can still have our various national languages, but we need a language that all Africans can relate to. That is Ekome Nandi. And we have Apostle Ahideno James, I hope I got the name correct, who says, one language cannot promote and achieve the Africa we want, but love will do it. I mean, the love of God towards one another. That is from our apostle. And Nandi Ekome again says, with the nationalistic spirit of many African countries, one other challenge might be to impose their own national language as the lingua franca. So for this to happen, we must be united in spirit too. Thank you so much, Nandi. And I have Millie Nanfuma, who says, in the Bible, on the day of Pentecost, when the people received the Holy Spirit, they spoke in different languages and they understood each other, I think. So one language will not work on my point of view. Good, that is your point of view, and you sign. And we have one other interesting. What if we have knowledge transfer through volunteerism? I like this one. Those parents who have the mastery of the common language can support, I suppose that's what was supposed to be written, can support others. It means that those who know the languages can teach others who don't know. So volunteer teachers could really be a resource. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contributions. Get your contributions coming. We'll be reading them as they come in. Thank you so much, Pauline, for the analysis you made on the drawbacks that we could have in instilling one language for Africa. And I equally had what you talked about, equality and inequality.
I want to add something.
Let me finish. Yes, that if we adopt any language that we are going to adopt, however, is going to be of advantage to others and demand so much from others who have to start learning that language from scratch. Thank you so much. Yes, Philip, I come back to you.
I want to add something. I've just seen a comment. I think we're allowed to react on the comment of our viewers. The apostle just said that we need the love of God. Actually, I'm born again, and I thank God. I love Jesus as my personal savior. But the tower, if the apostle can remember the tower in the Bible, it fell. It was the Tower of Babel. It fell. I think it's Genesis 11. It fell because of different languages. So I think even for us to express the love of God, we need to be able to communicate to each other across Africa, to express the love and to communicate the love. I think we need one language. So yes, thank you
so much. Thank you so much. That was Apostle's point of view, and we appreciate his contribution. Thank you, Apostle. Keep your contributions coming.
Very true.
Love of
very
God
true.
is always so welcome, and we hope and wish that we continue to be in the love of God, especially now that we have the coronavirus. Some people decide just to spread it, but the love of God can prevent somebody who has it to know that it is not proper to contaminate their loved ones around. So love of God, like Apostle said, is so paramount. And now we already looked at the hindrances that we could encounter. But now, what do you think if we actually, everything being considered, every other thing kept constant, that we do not have problems with resources, we do not have problems with inequality and equality, we do not have a problem of acceptance of a new language, we do not have problems of age and all that can entail to hinder the one language for Africa. What do you think, if every other thing is kept constant, what will be the advantages of a unique language for Africa? I take Philip. I saw you nodding your head like you wanted already to take the answer.
Yes.
What would be
obviously,
the advantages?
Yes, obviously, number one advantage, I think what we will enjoy is peace. We will enjoy very good peace. We will enjoy peace from God. We will enjoy peace from our neighboring countries, and we will enjoy all that peace, you know, all that good things that is connected to peace. And apart from peace, we will have great development. Because we will be easily be trading with each other, because the communication will be very easy. Okay, as I said before. Number two, I think through trading and all that, our countries will be developed, because when Tanzania develops, Kenya will develop, because we can easily communicate. You know, for us, we share a lot of things, but when we can go beyond our East African border and go up to Egypt and go down to South Africa, I think we will grow together as a continent, and we will be able to argue and talk as a country rather than as African continent. And when I mean a country, I put that in quote, because we can have one language and still have other independent countries in Africa. So when we grow together, when we talk one language and we have peace and we trade together freely, I think we will be easily able to talk to even other continents, because as I said before, I like saying this because we are one of the richest continents. And when we are able to talk together as one continent, okay, we will be able to talk with foreigners like Europe, like UK, like China. We'll be able to talk one, so that we are not exploited. Because one thing I believe is that we are also being exploited of our resources, because of we can't communicate. Every country speaks for themselves. Okay, every country speaks for themselves. Congo speaks for themselves. Kenya speaks for themselves. Cameroon speaks for themselves. And when we speak for ourselves, we don't have bargaining power. Just like people forming cooperatives. When people form cooperatives, when you want to take your banana to the market, when your banana was, let me say, for example, 0.5 euros, you know, when we come together as a group, we will say, these are our bananas. And these are our bananas. We can only sell them to you at 2 euros. Who will not listen? Because we are the only people who have banana. We are the only people who have gold. So when we speak one language, it is very easy for us to talk as East African or as Africans who are selling banana. We will talk as one Africa who is selling gold. We will talk as one Africa who is having diamond. So when we come together with one language and we talk together and we say, oh, look, we have this. But this is what we are offering as Africa, not as Kenya, not as Cameroon, not as Namibia. We are offering this as Africa. I think it will be very easy for us to develop, because that means we will have high value for what we are offering. We will have foreign exchange. We will be able to interact freely across Africa, and even movement will be easy. And which means even tourism will be tourism intra-Africa, and intra-country tourism within Africa will also rise, because I can easily go to Egypt, even if I don't speak the Arabic, and we can speak one language, that is Kiswahili or whichever language that Africa chooses, I can easily go and visit Egypt, because maybe I'm afraid to go and visit Burkina Faso because I don't speak their language. How will I interact with them? So all those things, when we look at all those things, that is why it is good we have one language. But also, I think one language is also not a recipe or the automatic recipe for development. Maybe I'll add that later on. But for now, I think those are some of the good things that we can get when we have one language as Africa.
Thank you so much. I think Nandi Ray Ekome is following you so closely, and she supports your point by saying that regional integration too will be easier if we can have a common language. Thank you so much, Nandi Ray Ekome, for your
Thank you, Nandi, for
contributions.
that.
Keep
Yeah.
them coming.
I agree.
And equally share our link with your friends that they can equally enjoy what you are enjoying and equally contribute their quota to what we are doing. Thank you so much. You talked of peace, trade, foreign exchange, easy movement, and tourism, which could be advantages of one common language, intra and inter national tourism, which I equally appreciate you for all those points. I'm sure Paulina will have something to add on the advantages of a common language for Africa.
Yes, I admire Philip's optimism that with one common language we can all arrive to agreements in regards to trade. But as someone with a political science background, I think in the end, individual state interests will always trump such kind of block economics deals where if I'm South Africa and I stand to gain from a certain deal, I'm going to break rank with the rest of SADC. And such a thing has happened on multiple occasions. So for me, I don't think that's something that a common language will fix. But I do see that there could be benefits in terms of having one common African language. And for me, as someone who loves to read, what I think we would gain is in terms of literature. Because right now, the books from Africa that I have access to are the ones that are written in English or that have been translated into English. But I know there are wonderful novels out there in all the other African or AU official languages that I will never get to read until they are translated into English, because that is the language I have access to. But if we can come up with our lingua franca, then from the beginning, we write our novels and our stories in our lingua franca, and we are wonderful storytellers. So for me, the benefits will be more cultural than economic. And I think we definitely are ready for a cultural renaissance on this continent. If you look at our music scene right now, we are doing amazing things across different nations in different languages. So imagine what we could do with one language, the collaborations we could come up with.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution. Like Philip said, that he's still going to come up that one language is not a magic solution to development. We'll be coming back to that opinion, Philip. We've seen already the hindrances that we can have, the drawbacks. We've seen the advantages that the single language can procure, what the single language can procure for Africa as a continent in terms of development. And I think as our debate is going on, for those who are joining us now, we're looking at an integrated, united, and confident continent by 2063. And we are basing on how one common African language can promote and achieve the Africa that we want for 2063. That is the theme for our debate or our discussion this evening. And we are welcoming all those who are coming in. We are live on Facebook and equally on YouTube. Get into our website, share our link, so that you can equally invite other young Africans, youths of Africa, of course, to join us in this train, which we are going forward towards the agenda at 2063. That is the heart of our discussions every Monday here on this platform. And like I said, this is your space, this is your platform. Contact us if you're interested to be part of our programs, and you all are very, very much welcome. I come back to my panelists. Thank you already so much for the wonderful points you're bringing forth. We are saying, there is nothing that is having just advantages. Disadvantages are always there, but sometimes the advantages, outweighs the disadvantages, and we can go in for that particular aspect. And today we're looking at a common language for Africa, which can be of benefit as concerns Africa's development. Thank you so much, and thank everyone watching us all over Africa and around the world. Do you think countries that already have one language as an official language are more united and experience more development, Pauline?
I'm not convinced of the link between a singular language and high levels of development. So I'm inclined to say no. And when we're looking at regions on a continental level, and obviously the easiest point of comparison is the EU, the European Union, they have 24 official languages, but they're still doing quite well economically. So while it would benefit Africa to have a lingua franca so we can all speak to each other and get to know each other, I think other things are more important to bring about development. So, for example, ease of trade across borders. So within SADC, we can all trade with each other, but it's not so easy for Namibia to trade with Nigeria or even Gambia. So once we open up those borders and have the freedom to trade with each other and trade with each other first as preference, then I think we will reach higher levels of development as opposed to Namibia's fish from Walvis Bay going entirely to Europe. Meanwhile, there's landlocked neighbors who could use those fish resources. Even Namibia itself, as an exporter of fish consumption nationally is quite low. So for me, the thing that I believe would bring more development to the continent is trading amongst ourselves, freedom of trade. I should be able to eat pineapples from Tanzania rather than from Ecuador or somewhere in South America.
Okay, thank you so much. Before I get to Philip, I want to, anyway, let me get Philip before I come back to the worry that just came up my mind as you were talking. Philip, do you think that countries that are already having one official language can be said to be more united and equally experience much development?
Yes, Mr. Elvis, as I said before, that the role of language in socio-economic development cannot be overemphasized, and it brings peace, it brings unity that can bring a country together, that creates an environment for development. However, most of these countries have not made use of this opportunity. The fact that they have been brought together with one language. But I can say, for example, in Kenya, in the East Africa, we have two official languages, that is Swahili and English. But I can say we are quite doing better than some of our neighbors. I think a country that I would expect from the East African that could have been doing very well is Tanzania, which we are still ahead of them, you know. But they embraced Swahili very early, and they denounced their tribe, not really denounced, but they became one. They had a language as symbol of unity, and their president, I can say, Mwalimu Nyerere. But also, when we look at outside Africa, we have areas where they speak the one common language, like in Latin America. But you see, there are some of the poorest countries in the world also come from there. We have poor countries from those sides. So I think as much as we can have unity, we can have that opportunity to trade together, to develop together as a country. I think some of the countries have not made use of this opportunity. And one of the problems, or one of the reasons, or one of the hindrances that has not made us make use of this opportunity is that we still in denial. We still want to live in our tribal or our ethnic cocoons. You know, like in Kenya, I just told you, our leaders still make use of our different languages as much as we have national language. The other day, I think a week ago, let me just give that example. I know you don't like those examples, Elvis, but let me just give that example. My country, my president was on a national TV talking to people from various areas, and he was speaking in his own language, you know, at some point. You know, so that's some of the things that is taking us back. And then as much as we have corruption, and when somebody is being arrested for corruption, we want to say, this is our person. We now leave the national language. Now we go back to our own languages and we say, you are targeting our person. And I think that is very common across Africa. So as much as we want to have a national language, it creates that peace, it brings us together. But because of those challenges of corruption, us living in denial, and this is, we call it in Kenya, we call it Mutu Wetu syndrome. Now that you guys want to embrace Swahili, you have to learn Swahili. We call it Mutu Wetu, means our person.
Yes, Philip. That incites me. That incites me.
Yes.
That incites me to the question I wanted to ask. So I said that we're going to come back to Swahili, and I said Swahili is the dream language for the Agenda 2063. But up to now, in many countries, nobody is talking about Swahili already as a language that should be taught in school. How do you envisage or envision the era of multilingualism with this, a slow nature of the implementation and introduction of Kiswahili into the academic curriculum? Let me put it like that.
Can I go before Paulina, if you don't mind, because I was already with that
yes,
mood?
Yes, you're already on.
Okay, so,
yes.
So I think for me, Swahili will be, if we had to take one language that we will speak across Africa, I think Swahili will be very easy to adapt, because we have very many people in Africa speaking Arabic, or the Somalis, because I think the Arabic is very close to Swahili, and we share very many words in Swahili than when you want to talk about maybe English. But also English is also spoken across many countries of the Africa. For example, Rwanda has been speaking their own, I don't know, it's called Rwandese or something, and then they are now coming back to English, So I think even before we decide, I think we have to weigh between English or Swahili, which one do we want to. But I think Swahili will be very easy, because most people speak Arabic, which is like in the northern part of Africa, and then in East Africa. So I think the people which will really have a challenge with Kiswahili, if we are to assume Kiswahili as the African language, one language, I think South Africans will have a problem. Like I call her my friend here, will have a very, but I will teach her. Though I'm not a very good teacher, but I'll teach her.
Okay, Pauline, what is your take about this? I was saying that Kiswahili is a dream language by the AU for 2063, and that this language, of course, is not known to many people, and it's not even yet introduced, given already that Philip talked of the hindrance as being acceptance of a new language, going back to school to learn. Don't you think this language would have been introduced already earlier enough by this time, so that by 2063, those who are not accepting just by hearing must have been learning some few words already in Kiswahili. I hope I'm pronouncing it properly.
Kiswahili.
I think Kiswahili will likely be the language of choice by the African Union. I believe when they adopted it as one of the official languages, the sitting president at that time delivered the speech entirely in Kiswahili. So it is a good option, because, as I said, it is the 14th most spoken language in the world, and it has about 90 million speakers across the continent. So it's definitely a good contender for a continental lingua franca. In South Africa, if I read correctly, has been speaking about already implementing teaching Kiswahili in their schools. But the problem is that, especially within the Southern African region, we are struggling with our multilingualism already as is. So, for example, the Namibian education system recognizes and teaches 10 African languages. And if we were to add Swahili, that would make 11 African languages plus English, German, and Afrikaans. So that would be 14 languages in the education system of a country of 2.5 million people. Imagine the resources that the government would have to spend on that. So eventually, with the introduction of a lingua franca, nations would have to drop off some of the national African languages. So it might end up that we have a curriculum that speaks to English and Kiswahili at the expense of local national languages. But South Africa seems to be interested in leading the way in adopting Kiswahili as a language to be taught in their schools. And it makes sense economically for them because they're trying to tap into that whole East African market and benefiting for that and being ahead of the curve. So I think it will be very interesting to see if the rest of the continent follows or if others are as interested and as eager as South Africa is.
Let me just queue up with you. What would be your recommendations? What recommendations can you send forward as concerns this lingua franca, one language for Africa? Let me just queue up with you, and then I come back to Philip. One last word. What can you say as a conclusive point after having appreciated and cynically the drawbacks of one language for Africa? What is your take-home message?
I think before countries rush to adapt lingua franca for the continent, we should first examine, study, and compare our collective experiences with mother tongue instruction on top of English, French, or other official language instruction, because I think we'll find that many of us struggled to get that formula right. And it's something that we could use to learn as to how to proceed with implementation of a lingua franca for the continent. And I think it's a good idea. However, it's not something that I would prioritize in the top 10 of the things that the AU could do to bring the continent closer. For me, the things that are more important are about making Africa more accessible to Africans, especially through trade and freedom of movement for people. And then because I work in higher education, recognition of the African Continental Qualifications Framework, so that if I got my degree from Namibia, I can easily go look for employment in Kenya, and my degree, there's a system to recognize and value my degree, so to say, so that I can easily get employment. So for me, those things are more important. Freedom of movement across Africa, education and qualifications, higher education, investing in that, as well as, of course, making it more easy for us to trade with each other. That has to be the top priority, those three things. The language will come later as we interact more.
All right. Thank you so much, Pauline. That was a powerful take-home message. I come to my man, Philip. What will be your last word if you have to say something for our youth, for Africa, for our continent, for AU?
My last message is that a lingua franca will serve as a unifying force for Africa. Nations and ethnic groups should work together and agree on one language for education and communication. It will help commerce and interaction among Africa, just as I said before. But one thing that we should, a disclaimer that is that it may not be priority. I don't know why we are always on one side with Paulina. Paulina, I think you should move to Kenya. One thing that we all need to agree is that it will not be the one main recipe for development in Africa. There are other things that we can do. We have very many biases that was already pulling us down as Africans that we need to work on first so that we can move together as a continent. However, after all this is said and done, having one language can really take us far. And just like other continents, just like US should be very many countries, but because they speak one language, I think they are stronger and they can speak together and command us. And that is what we don't want. We want to have one language so that we can also command others. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. I must say I'm so happy to have had two of you as my panelists for this topic, which has so been interesting. And we have so many comments coming up. People are interested with the topic. And I hope that you keep watching us live on Facebook, live on YouTube, every Monday, 7 p.m. German time. Thank you so much, Pauline. Thank you, Philip. And today we're looking at language. And if we have to summarize all we have said, I think we have one language which can bring about development in Africa, improve on tourism, bring about peace, interaction, national integration, and what have you. And I think one language, though we say it's not a magic recipe, but to begin with, if we have one language, other things will fall in place. Remember, there is no aspect that has just the positive part of it. There are always the negative part of it, but the positive of already one language for Africa outweighs the disadvantages or the drawbacks that we may have. So thank you so much. And remember, we are saying that by 2063, Kiswahili is going to be our official language. And like we said, it is one of the languages that's easy to speak, and it's spoken by many Africans. So really, let me put Africans, not African countries. And I'm hoping that sooner than later, we are going to have Kiswahili taught or other volunteers, like one of our viewers said, other volunteers who already understand Swahili or Kiswahili are going equally to volunteer to teach those who don't know. And I think that will be a big blow to those who have to learn the language. And for those of you who already understand Swahili, I don't know if I'm mixing them, Kish and Swahili. I hope the message goes. And so you see the importance of us having one language. Thank you so much, everyone, for having participated in this program. One language for Africa is going to take us bounds, and one language for Africa is going to improve on a culture. We'll be able to express ourselves. We'll be able to share the knowledge we have gotten from other languages to other people. We are going to be able to excel in our businesses. We'll do business with every other African. Every other African is going to feel at home wherever he or she is. Remember, we talked already about currency. So we have one language, one currency. It will just be the best for Africa. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, so much for watching our program. Remember, we are live every day on every Monday, 7 p.m. German time. We equally have other programs on Some Point Global TV. We have the debate that comes up equally 7 p.m. on Thursdays. And we have our business talk, which just ended its 1 week intensive classes for the Some Point Master business classes. Thank you so much, and keep the faith. Keep watching our programs. Bye-bye for now.